Let's come back to Mr. Powell and Professor Taylor, okay, and maybe some combination of the two, one in chair, one in vice chair. What does that combination say to you?
Well, you could certainly see Governor Powell move into the Fed chair seat and John Taylor become vice chair. So markets would probably take that as a little bit more hawkish bend, but I would say that's a knee-jerk reaction, and you would probably want to assume that markets might come off that stance, but that would be the initial knee-jerk reaction, just because you would have Taylor backing up Powell, Taylor, who's married to whichever version of the day of his Taylor rule is dominating. But, you know, Governor Powell, we know him. Right, we know him. He was there for many of the extraordinary policies. He was there devising the getting off of zero and helping draw down the balance sheet. And so we know his reaction function is very similar to Janet Yellen's, except he would be Yellen only light on regulation. And I think particularly equities would take that very well.
Steve, let's get to the market reaction when it comes to, say, treasuries. Take a look at the Bloomberg here, and this is the biggest short position ever for 5-year treasury futures. We saw that last week. We also saw a reduction in dollar short positions. Is this the trade that we're going to see as we move towards a Fed nominee?
Well, I mean, obviously the decision about the Fed nominee is of importance, but, you know, for me, when I look at the bond market, for instance, and I think, well, you know, what's the enemy of the bond market? Is it whoever may be the next Fed chair or the next Fed vice chair, or is it really inflation? And as far as I'm concerned, it's inflation, and that enemy hasn't really turned up. And therefore, who you have fighting inflation, for the moment at least, doesn't perhaps seem to matter too much. So I think there may obviously be a slight rise in yields, perhaps, if we get that sort of Powell-Taylor combination. But I think really the key, obviously, going forward for me is what happens with inflation. If that remains dormant, then whatever changes those pair, for instance, might want to make, they're just going to have to sit on their hands, I would have thought.